If you have ever driven at night, followed a familiar route after midnight, trusted a set of headlights to carry you the rest of the way home, you have placed your faith in a system that only works while you are awake. Because roads are not destinations. They are not places meant to hold you. They are not designed to be remembered. They exist to move people through space, to connect points on a map, to disappear the moment you leave them behind. Most of the time, they do exactly that. The lines stay straight, the signs stay legible. The distance behaves the way distance is supposed to, but that reliability is conditional. It depends on visibility, on attention, on time, behaving normally. Late at night, those conditions change. The landmarks thin out, the exits grow farther apart, radio stations lose their identity, and the road stops offering confirmation that you are making progress at all. Most drivers believe the danger is obvious. Fatigue, speed, weather, drunk drivers, mechanical failure. Those are known risks. They can be planned for. They have explanations. The real danger is what doesn't escalate. The stretch of highway that feels longer than it should. The mile marker that repeats. The town that appears when you were certain there was nothing there. The car behind you that never passes. The sense that the road has stopped responding to your decisions. Highways feel safe because they are maintained, because they are traveled, because thousands of people use the same routes every night and arrive exactly where they intended. But roads do not track outcomes. They do not care where you are going, and they do not correct themselves when something goes slightly wrong. A road does not have to trap you to become dangerous. It only has to continue forward while removing every clear option to leave. A missed exit, a fuel gauge you thought you could stretch, a detour that isn't marked, a turn you don't remember taking, a stretch of darkness where nothing new appears for far too long. Tonight, these are not stories about crashes or chases or breakdowns. They are ordinary drives taken by people who believed the system around them was stable. 5 roads, 5 late-night journeys, and 5 moments where the route stopped behaving as expected. Not dramatically, not violently, but precisely enough to make turning back feel impossible. So watch your mileage, check your mirrors, keep the radio on, and pay attention to how long it has been since you last passed something familiar. And if the road begins to feel too consistent, too empty, or too patient, do not assume you are still moving through it. Because sometimes the road isn't dangerous because it is broken, but because it is doing exactly what it was built to do long after it stops taking you where you meant to go. Story 1. The mile markers don't line up. U.S. Route 50, Nevada, the loneliest road. I left Ely later than I meant to. That was the first mistake. Not a big one, not dramatic, just the kind you don't notice until the road is empty and the night has fully committed to itself. I had told myself I would make it to Fallon before midnight, maybe even push through to Carson City if the caffeine held. But the diner in Ely had been warm, and my phone had been dead, and the waitress kept refilling my mug like she was trying to keep me there. By the time I walked back out to my car, the air had that metallic desert cold that goes straight through fabric. The parking lot lights buzzed softly. Everything that wasn't directly under them dissolved into black. A few trucks slept near the edge of the lot, and beyond that the highway waited, patient and flat, like it had been built to outlast the idea of urgency. I remember thinking how clean the night felt. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic, just the faint ticking of my engine cooling and the dry smell of sage. U.S. Route 50 looked like a ribbon cut through the dark. I pulled onto it and pointed west. For the first 40 minutes, it was exactly what people say it is. The loneliest road. A straight stretch of asphalt and reflective paint with nothing on either side but darkness and the suggestion of land. My headlights carved out a small, obedient cone. The road markings appeared, passed under me, disappeared. The center line flickered in rhythmic dashes. The right shoulder line held steady like a rule. I turned the radio on for company. Static, then a faraway talk station that kept fading in and out like it was breathing. The display on my dash said it was 11:42 p.m. The outside temperature read 31 degrees. I set the cruise control. I checked my mirrors. I watched the road. That is what you do on a night drive. You become a set of habits. At 12:08 a.m., I passed mile marker 112. It was a thin white post on the right shoulder, lit for a half second as it slipped through my headlights. 112. Clean black numbers. Standard. I did not think about it. At 12:17 a.m., I passed mile marker 117. Again, normal. I was making good time. That was the point of doing this drive at night. No traffic, no delays, just miles eaten cleanly. At 12:23 a.m., I passed mile marker 119. I remember it because I glanced at the clock after doing the casual math in my head that you do when you are trying to stay sharp. 7 minutes, 2 miles, fine. At 12:28 a.m., I passed mile marker 114. I saw it and felt my thoughts stumble, as if the road had shifted sideways under my tires. 114. I looked back at it in the mirror, but of course it was gone immediately, swallowed by the dark behind me. For a few seconds I waited for the correction to come. Maybe I had misread the last one. Maybe it was 109. Maybe the reflective paint had made the numbers blur. Maybe I was tired enough to invert digits. I rolled my shoulders, tightened my grip on the wheel, and tried to set it aside. Then at 12:35 a.m., I passed mile marker 115, and at 12:41 a.m., mile marker 116, and at 12:49 a.m., mile marker 117 again. That was the moment it became impossible to ignore. It was not just one marker. It was not my eyes. It was not fatigue. The numbers were clean. The post was clean. It stood where it should stand. It announced itself with the same brief flare of reflection. 117. But I'd already passed 117. I reached for my phone out of habit, then remembered it was still charging from a portable battery on the passenger seat. The screen lit dimly. No signal, of course. I had known that. Most of Route 50 is a dead zone. My GPS was mounted on the dash, running off offline maps. The little arrow that represented my car moved steadily along the thin line of highway. It showed my speed. It showed my estimated arrival time. Everything looked normal. It told me I was westbound. It told me the next town would be Austin. It told me I would reach it in 52 minutes. Austin, Nevada. A place I had never been, but had seen on maps like a dot that existed purely out of stubbornness. The GPS did not flicker. It did not hesitate. It did not acknowledge anything strange, because it did not know there was anything to acknowledge. I told myself the mile markers might have been replaced out of sequence. I told myself road crews sometimes mess things up. I told myself that long highways have long histories and sometimes their bones don't line up the way the map says they should. But mile markers are not decorative. They are part of the system. They are how the system speaks to itself. They are how you tell someone where you are when you need help. I drove on, eyes sharp, waiting for the next one. At 1:02 a.m., I passed mile marker 119. Again, the exact same number I had seen earlier. Same font, same spacing, same brief flare as my headlights caught it. My stomach tightened, not in fear yet, but in that first stage of confusion where you feel the world trying to reorganize itself in your mind. I took my foot off the cruise control and let the car slow to 60, then 55, then 50. The speedometer needle dipped, the engine pitch softened. The GPS still insisted I was making progress. It adjusted my arrival time to Austin by 3 minutes. That was all. The road did not change. The dark did not change. The desert on either side did not reveal itself. I slowed further to 45. Behind me, nothing. Ahead, nothing. And then, as if to punctuate the thought, a mile marker came into view. 121. A relief, almost. The numbers made sense. The sequence was back. My brain latched onto it like a drowning person. Maybe I had hit a weird stretch, a temporary anomaly. Maybe there had been a detour years ago, and the posts never got updated. Maybe I had drifted onto a parallel frontage road and rejoined. Maybe the road curved in a way I could not see in the dark. I let my speed creep back up. At 1:19 a.m., mile marker 123. At 1:26 a.m., mile marker 124. At 1:33 a.m., mile marker 125. Normal. I exhaled and realized I had been holding my breath for a long time. The desert has a way of making you second-guess your senses. The lack of reference points, the way distance collapses into darkness, the way your headlights become the only reality you can trust. It is easy to believe that the world is doing something strange when you are the only moving thing in it. I turned the radio up a little. The talk station had faded to static. I flipped through frequencies until I found a country song, faint but steady, like it was being broadcast from a bar in another dimension. The DJ's voice was distorted. The music was warped at the edges. It was still better than silence. At 1:47 a.m., I saw the broken reflector for the first time. It was on the right shoulder, near the edge of the pavement. A small strip of reflective tape had peeled away from a post, leaving a jagged, hanging flap that caught my headlights and flashed irregularly. Not the clean, crisp reflection of intact tape, but a fluttering, sickly glint, like something blinking. It was nothing. It was a scrap of material. It stood out only because there was nothing else to look at. I passed it and did not think about it again. At 2:03 a.m., I passed it again. The same jagged flap, the same weird blink, the same position relative to the road, the same faint shadow it cast on the gravel. I felt my hands go cold. I looked down at the GPS. My little arrow continued west. The estimated time to Austin continued to tick down. 47 minutes. 46. I had been driving for hours. I had passed mile marker 125. I should have been deep into the 130s by now. I watched for the next mile marker, suddenly desperate for it. At 2:11 a.m., mile marker 124. Not 126, not 127, 124. My mouth went dry. I slowed. I stared. I forced myself to read it twice, to not let my mind play tricks. 124. The sequence had reversed again. That was when I started to feel something under the confusion. Not fear yet, but the shape of it. The road was behaving like a loop, like a strip of film catching and repeating, like a conveyor belt moving but not advancing. I did not understand how that could be true. My rational mind pushed back hard, searching for reasons. Misplaced posts, detour, construction, fatigue, even hallucination. But the broken reflector had come back, and it had come back exactly. It was not a mile marker that might have been installed wrong. It was damage, a unique flaw in the landscape. It should not have repeated. The next town was Austin. I had been watching for signs for it, the way you do on a long drive. Not because you are excited to arrive, but because the idea of a town is a promise. Lights, people, gas stations, bathrooms, something that breaks the isolation and confirms you are still moving through a real world. At 2:18 a.m., a sign appeared in my headlights. A green highway sign, reflective, mounted on 2 metal poles. It said, Austin, 45 miles. I stared at it until it was behind me. 45 miles. That was reasonable. That was fine. The GPS said 44 minutes. The math lined up. A knot in my chest loosened slightly. The system was still speaking. The system still knew where I was going. I drove on. At 2:31 a.m., another sign appeared. Austin, 45 miles. Same font, same spacing, same reflective sheen, same distance. I felt a cold wave move through my body, starting at my shoulders and sliding down my spine. I glanced at the GPS. It still insisted I was making progress. It still insisted Austin was coming. But the sign had not changed. And now, I could feel it. The subtle shift in the texture of the night. The road no longer felt like a path through space. It felt like a corridor. A defined channel with walls made of darkness, repeating its own elements to keep me oriented while refusing to let me leave. I rolled down my window just to feel something outside the controlled climate of my car. Cold air slapped my face, sharp and dry. It smelled like stone and dust. The sound of my tires on pavement became louder, more present. For a moment, I imagined I could hear something else under it. Not a voice, not an animal, not a clear sound, but a low, distant hum, like a power line, like infrastructure, like the road itself had a frequency. I rolled the window up again, heart beating faster. I needed a plan. The simplest plan was to turn around. That thought brought a strange relief. Turning around would break the pattern. It would restore control. It would prove that this was just a stretch of road playing tricks on my tired mind. I waited until I saw a wide shoulder. In the dark, it was hard to judge. Route 50 is narrow in places, with little room for error. I did not want to stop on a blind curve. I did not want to pull off into gravel and get stuck. Finally, I saw a break. A small dirt turnout on the right. It was unmarked, just a widening of the shoulder into the desert. I slowed, signaled, and pulled off. The headlights swept across sagebrush and rock, illuminating a small circle of land that looked exactly like every other piece of land I had seen for hours. No trash, no footprints, no tire tracks, just undisturbed gravel and scrub. I stopped the car, put it in park, turned off the radio. The silence hit like pressure. I sat for a moment, listening to my engine idle, my own breathing, the faint ticking of cooling metal. Outside, the desert waited without sound. I looked at the clock, 2:38 a.m. I took my phone off the charger and held it up. Still no signal. The screen brightness felt too sharp in the dark. I opened my GPS app again, zoomed out. The map showed my route, a thin line. It showed my position, a small arrow. It showed the towns behind and ahead. It did not show a loop. It did not show anything wrong. I put the phone down and looked through my windshield. The road ahead was empty, a black strip with reflective paint. I turned the wheel all the way left, checked the road, and executed a careful U-turn, my headlights sweeping across the desert and briefly illuminating my own tire tracks in the gravel. When the car straightened, I was facing east. I paused, took a breath, then I drove. The strange thing was how normal it felt for the first few minutes. The same road, just reversed. The same lines, the same darkness, the same mild vibration through the steering wheel. My brain tried to relax into the familiar. Then I passed the broken reflector. It was on the right shoulder again. The same jagged flap, the same irregular blink, but it should have been on the left now. I gripped the wheel hard enough that my knuckles hurt. I checked my orientation. I was definitely eastbound. I had turned around. The stars, faint as they were, seemed to shift correctly. The GPS arrow pointed east. The compass in my car's infotainment system said E, and yet the broken reflector was in the same place relative to my lane, as if the road had rotated under me to keep it consistent, as if right shoulder was not a real direction, but a fixed position in the system. A mile marker appeared, 124. I had just seen 124 on the westbound side. I slowed, heart pounding, and watched the next marker, 123, then 122, then, impossibly, 117, again. The numbers were moving in the correct direction for eastbound, but they did not match the time I had spent driving. They jumped, skipped, repeated. The road was not letting me leave. That thought landed in my mind with a disturbing calmness, as if my brain had finally stopped arguing. I drove on anyway, because what else do you do? The headlights cut through the dark, the lines flickered. The radio remained off, and the silence pressed in. The longer I drove east, the more subtle changes I noticed. Not obvious changes, not dramatic shifts, but small absences. There were no distant lights behind me, no faint glow that might suggest another car far away, no occasional reflective glint from a sign I had passed earlier. It felt like I was driving through a model of a highway, the way a movie set is built. The parts you need are there, the parts you do not are omitted. I began to watch the edges of the road for anything that would prove I was in a real place. A piece of litter, a dead animal, a plant bent by wind, anything. But the shoulder was too clean, the gravel too uniform, the sagebrush too evenly spaced. I could not shake the sense that I was moving through a pattern. At 3:12 a.m., I saw the Austin sign. Again, Austin, 45 miles, eastbound. That made no sense. If I was eastbound, the sign for Austin should not exist. Austin was west of where I had started. It should have been behind me. The road should have been directing me toward Ely, toward towns I had already passed. But the sign was there, bright in my headlights, announcing the same distance as if nothing had changed. I laughed once, sharply, out loud in the empty car. It was not humor. It was my body trying to discharge panic through sound. My mouth felt numb, my throat tight. I turned the radio back on, suddenly desperate for anything human, static. Then, after a few seconds, a voice came through, clear enough to hear, but distorted at the edges, as if it was being transmitted through a long tunnel. Mile marker 117. I froze. The voice continued, calm and professional, like a weather advisory. Travelers advised to remain en route. Do not attempt off-road detours. I flipped the volume down, then up. The voice wavered, dipped into static, returned. If you pass the same marker more than once, maintain speed, maintain direction, do not stop. My heart hammered in my chest. I looked at the radio display. The frequency was not one I recognized. It was not even fully tuned, flickering between numbers like it could not settle. I reached to turn it off again, then stopped, because The voice, for the first time, felt like the road acknowledging what was happening. Not helping, not warning, acknowledging. I drove with my eyes locked on the lane, hands rigid on the wheel. The road remained empty. The desert remained dark. The mile markers continued their strange, broken sequence. At 3:28 a.m., I passed mile marker 117, and then, 2 minutes later, I passed mile marker 117 again. This time, I did something I had not done before. I looked at the base of the post. At the bottom, where the white paint met the dirt, there was a small smear of something dark, like grease, like a handprint brushed low. It was not there on the first 117 I had seen. I was sure of it, because I would have noticed. I was watching too closely now to miss something like that. The second 117 had it. I swallowed hard. The road was not just repeating, it was changing within the repetition, like it was adjusting. I thought about the people who maintain highways, the invisible system of crews and schedules and trucks that keep roads functional, the way we assume that infrastructure is passive, that it exists for us and does not respond. But the voice on the radio had said travelers advised, as if the road had a protocol, as if this had happened before. I needed to do something that was not predicted by the system, something that would break the loop. A part of my brain suggested the stupidest possible thing: turn off the headlights. In a place like this, at night, turning off your headlights is not just risky, it is insane. It is a way to kill yourself quickly. You do not do it, which meant it might be the one thing the road was not built to handle. My hands trembled. I waited until the lane seemed straight, until there was nothing in the cone of my vision but black and the faint glow of reflective paint. Then I clicked the headlights off. The darkness swallowed everything instantly. It was absolute. Not the kind of darkness where you can still make out shapes. Not the kind where your eyes adjust. It was like someone had put a lid over the world. For a half second, I felt weightless, untethered. Then, in the black, I saw something. A single reflector, blinking irregularly. The broken one. It hung in the air, detached from context, floating in the dark like an eye. It was ahead of me. I had no headlights. There was no way I should have been able to see it. And yet it blinked, bright, close, as if it had moved into my lane. My stomach dropped. I slammed the headlights back on. The road snapped back into existence. The broken reflector was now on the right shoulder, slightly ahead, exactly where it always was. I passed it. My breathing came in harsh bursts. My hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. I did not know what I had just seen, but I understood the message. The road did not need my headlights to see. It did not need my participation to keep the pattern running. And now, it knew I was trying to break it. At 3:49 a.m., I saw something I had not seen all night. Taillights. Red points in the distance ahead, faint but real. Another vehicle. My heart surged with relief, so intense, it was almost painful. I leaned forward, squinting, verifying it was not a reflection, not a trick. The taillights held steady, moving at roughly my speed. I accelerated, closing the distance. As I got closer, I saw it was an old pickup truck, dark-colored, with a camper shell. The rear window was dirty. The license plate was there, but my headlights could not fully catch it. I flashed my brights once, just a quick signal, the way you do to get someone's attention, to communicate. The truck did not react. I flashed again, longer, still nothing. I pulled closer, keeping a safe distance, and tried to see inside. The rear window reflected my headlights, making it impossible to see through. The truck felt oddly opaque, like a moving shadow, but it was something. It was another human being. It was proof of reality. I stayed behind it for 10 minutes, then 20. The truck never changed speed, never drifted, never signaled. Then, without any warning, it took a turn. Not a marked exit, not a ramp, just a break in the shoulder that I had not seen until the truck's brake lights flared and it slid off the pavement into the desert. A dirt track, narrow, unlit. It vanished into darkness, as if it had been swallowed. I slowed, heart pounding. My first instinct was to follow. If someone lived out here, if there was a ranch, a house, a person, then maybe I could get help. Maybe I could ask them where I was, what was wrong with the road. But the dirt track looked too clean, too much like it had been placed there for the purpose of luring, and the radio voice, faint through static, returned. Do not attempt off-road detours. I stayed on the highway. The truck's taillights disappeared completely. Within 2 minutes, the road was empty again. And then, as if the highway wanted to remind me of its rules, I passed mile marker 117. I began to shake. Not from cold. From exhaustion, from fear, from the slow grinding realization that this was not a problem I could solve with logic. I could not outrun it, because distance did not behave. I could not turn back, because direction did not matter. I could not pull off, because the exits did not lead out. I was trapped inside a system that still looked like a road. At 4:12 a.m., the sky ahead began to lighten, almost imperceptibly. A faint thinning of black into deep blue. Dawn. The idea of it hit me like a promise. Daylight changes things. Daylight reveals. Daylight breaks illusions. It forces the world to align. I leaned into it, clinging. The light grew slowly. The horizon became a suggestion. The desert began to emerge, gray and flat, dotted with sagebrush. For the first time, I could see beyond my headlights, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The road did not run straight into the distance. It curved, not gently, not naturally, but in a wide arc, looping back toward itself. From my vantage, with the world finally visible, I could see the highway ahead bending, disappearing, then reappearing in the distance on the opposite side of the desert, running parallel, like a circle, like a track. I stared, mind refusing it. Highways do not do that. Route 50 does not loop like a race course. The map does not show a giant curve. And yet there it was, a black ribbon in the pale dawn, curving back toward itself like a deliberate design. On the far side of the loop, in the distance, I saw something else. A small cluster of lights. A town, Austin, or something that looked like it. I drove toward it, pulse hammering, eyes locked. As the minutes passed, the town did not get closer. The lights remained the same size. The distance refused to shrink. And then, on the right shoulder, as if to mark the moment, I passed mile marker 117. Again, this time, the dark smear at the base was larger, clearer. A full handprint, pressed into the white paint, low and deliberate, fingers splayed, as if someone had been there in the loop long enough to leave a mark, as if someone had tried to anchor themselves to the only thing that repeated. I swallowed hard, throat raw, and my mind did something strange. It stopped trying to escape. It started trying to endure. Because somewhere inside me, cold and quiet, a new assumption formed. The road was not malfunctioning. It was functioning. And I was not lost because I made a wrong turn. I was lost because the system decided it could hold me. I kept driving. The sky brightened. The loop continued. The town stayed distant. The broken reflector blinked in the corner of my vision, like a pulse. And mile marker 117 waited ahead, patient and certain, as if it had all the time in the world. Because it did. And now, so did I. Story 2. The town that wasn't on the map. U.S. Route 89, northern Arizona, near the Utah border. I noticed the fuel gauge dropping faster than it should have somewhere north of Flagstaff, when the dark started to thicken and the highway stopped feeling like a place people live near. Route 89 inches daylight is honest. It shows you the land. Long sweeps of desert, distant mesas, the occasional cluster of buildings that looks like it has been sunbaked into permanence. At night, it becomes something else. A thin lit corridor pushing through emptiness. You only see what your headlights decide is real. I had left late, like I always did. I told myself I was being efficient, beating the morning traffic, making good time. I was driving alone with a car full of small, modern comforts. A phone mount, a playlist, a cooler in the back, a portable battery on the passenger seat. The kind of setup that makes you feel prepared. Prepared for everything except how quickly a long road can make you stop believing in your own planning. I had a half tank when I left Flagstaff. That should have been plenty. I had driven this stretch before, or close enough to it, and I knew there were towns along the way. Cameron, Tuba City, Page, places that show up on maps and on signs, with gas stations and neon and the dull reassurance of commerce. But after an hour of driving into the dark, the towns seemed to stretch out. Not in an alarming way at first, just subtly. The intervals between the few tail lights on the road grew wider. The radio stations began to fade. The GPS map stayed confident, but it also stayed flat, the screen showing a single line moving through an empty beige field like a pen stroke. At 11:58 p.m., my fuel light came on. That should not have happened. I looked down at the gauge and felt a small, sharp irritation. Maybe the sensor was glitchy. Maybe I had misremembered the starting level. Maybe I had driven faster than I thought. I reached over and tapped the gauge the way people do, like physical contact can correct a digital truth. The light stayed on. I checked my phone for service out of habit. 1 bar, then none. The screen showed the empty status icon that always makes you feel slightly abandoned, even when you know it is normal. I told myself to stay calm. The simplest fix was to stop at the next station. There would be one. This was a highway. People drove this route every day. Trucks hauled freight. Families drove RVs. It wasn't the middle of nowhere, not truly. Then I went 20 miles without seeing anything. No exits, no lights, no billboards, no distant glows. Just the road and the dark, and the sense that I was driving through a corridor the world had forgotten. The fuel gauge dropped to the last tick. The little digital readout that estimated range started to blink at me like it was offended by my optimism. 30 miles, 28, 25. My hands tightened on the wheel. I turned down my music and listened, as if the engine could tell me something, as if I could hear the sound of fuel running out. The car hummed steadily, the tires a soft constant hiss. Everything sounded normal. That was the problem. I was running out of gas in a world that still sounded fine. At 12:17 a.m., I saw the sign. It was not an official highway sign. It was not reflective green metal with clean font. It was a piece of plywood nailed to a post on the right shoulder, painted in white letters that looked like they had been done with a brush and a steady hand. Gas. 2 miles. No arrow. No town name. Just the words. A spike of relief hit me so hard I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my body needed to release something. 2 miles. I could make 2 miles. I could probably push 10 if I had to, but 2 miles meant I didn't have to test that. I slowed slightly, scanning for the turn. There was no marked exit, but 2 miles on a highway goes quickly. 1 mile later, another sign appeared. Gas. 1 mile. Same plywood, same white paint. The letters were not sloppy, they were careful. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made the sign feel personal, like someone had taken the time to make sure it could be read in headlights. I started to look at the landscape differently. In the dark, the edges of the desert were only visible where the headlights fell off, but I could see silhouettes of brush, the faint rise and fall of the land, the suggestion of a dirt track cutting away from the highway. At 12:22 a.m., I saw the turn. It was not a proper exit. It was a break in the shoulder leading onto a dirt road. No streetlight, no reflective post, just a narrow path into darkness. For a second I hesitated. Dirt roads at midnight have a specific kind of risk. They lead to places that are not maintained, not patrolled, not marked. But the fuel gauge was nearly bottomed out, the light still blinking. I didn't have the luxury of caution. If I missed this, I might not find another. I signaled anyway, as if anyone was watching, then eased off the highway and onto the dirt road. The change in sound was immediate. Gravel popped under my tires, the steering wheel vibrated. Dust rose in my headlights like smoke. The road was just wide enough for one car. It curved gently, then dipped, then rose. It felt like it had been cut deliberately, not by random tires, but by repeated use. I drove slowly, careful not to bottom out, watching for rocks. After half a mile, I saw lights. A cluster at first, then clearer. Yellowish, warm, steady. Not the harsh white of modern LEDs, but the softer glow of older bulbs. It made my throat tighten with relief all over again. The town was small, but it existed. I could see buildings, low and squat, some with lit windows, a few streetlights, a strip of storefronts, a gas station with a canopy. The kind of place you would pass in daylight without thinking. One of those towns that barely registers on your memory. Except I had never seen it before. My GPS screen still showed me on a blank stretch of highway, the little arrow drifting slightly off the line where the dirt road would be if the map acknowledged it. The map did not. It was as if I had driven off the edge of its knowledge. I told myself that rural roads sometimes aren't mapped properly, that small towns sometimes don't show, that offline maps can be incomplete. The rationalizations came automatically, like my brain was a customer service representative trying to calm me down. I rolled into the town. There were no cars parked on the streets. No people walking, no dogs, no movement. The buildings looked intact, not abandoned, but the stillness was too complete. Even at midnight, towns have small signs of life. A porch light, a TV glow behind curtains, a truck passing through, a person stepping out for a smoke. This town felt as if it was being held in place. I drove straight to the gas station. It was lit. The canopy had 2 yellow bulbs that cast a circle of light on the concrete. The pumps were old, the kind with analog dials and black hoses. There were 4 of them, each with faded labels that used to be bright. The station office was attached to a small convenience store with a glass door and a flickering neon sign that simply read "Open." My hands were shaking slightly as I pulled up. Part of it was adrenaline. Part of it was the relief of almost running out of gas and not. Part of it was the fact that I had just driven into a town my phone did not know existed. I shut off the engine. The silence was immediate and heavy. Without the hum of the car, the night sounded empty. No insects, no wind, not even the faint hum of distant traffic. The town was like a bubble. I got out, the cold hitting my face, and walked to the pump. The air smelled like dust and gasoline, faint but real. My breath fogged in front of me. I lifted the nozzle. It was heavier than modern ones. The rubber grip felt worn, smooth, as if it had been held by countless hands. That was normal. That was reassuring. Evidence of use. I slid my card into the reader. Nothing happened. I tried again. The slot accepted the card with a dull mechanical resistance. No beep, no prompt. The small screen on the pump was dark. I stared at it, then looked up at the store. The neon open sign flickered again, as if to remind me I was supposed to go inside. I left the nozzle in its cradle and walked to the door. Inside, the convenience store was bright in a way that felt wrong. Fluorescent lights hummed. The shelves were stocked neatly with snacks, canned drinks, bags of chips, rows of candy. A cooler along the back wall held bottled water and soda. It looked like any rural gas station, except there was no one behind the counter. A bell above the door rang softly when I entered. The sound echoed slightly, as if the room had more empty space than it should. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded too loud. No answer. I stepped farther in. The floor was clean, the kind of clean you don't see in a truly abandoned place. The air was cool, like the AC was on. A small radio on the counter played something, but it was turned low, just enough to fill the silence with faint music that had no clear melody. I approached the counter and leaned over slightly. Behind it was a doorway into what looked like a back room. "Hey," I called again, trying to keep my tone casual. "I just need to get some gas." Still nothing. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. In most places, someone would appear by now. Annoyed, distracted, apologetic. The absence began to feel deliberate. I looked around the store for signs of recent human presence. A coffee cup, a jacket, a half-eaten snack. Anything. There was nothing out of place. The shelves were stocked in straight lines. The candy bars faced forward. The counter was clear except for a cheap display of lighters and a small, dusty box of lottery scratchers. The scratchers caught my eye because they were the only thing that looked old. The cardboard display had a date printed on it. 2011. That was a long time ago. I frowned, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was just an old display. Maybe it had been in storage. But the print looked too crisp, the cardboard too intact. I stepped around the counter, which felt like something you should not do. But the store was empty, and I needed someone to ring up my gas. The doorway to the back room was open. Beyond it, I saw another corridor, dimly lit, leading deeper into the building. "Hello?" I called again, softer now. From somewhere in that back corridor, I heard a sound, a shuffle, like a foot sliding. I froze. Then, slowly, a man stepped into view. He was older, maybe late 60s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His hair was gray and cut short. His face was lined, but not in a soft way. He looked like someone who had spent a long time not being surprised by anything. He looked directly at me. His eyes were not blank. They were focused. But there was something in his expression that made my stomach tighten, like he was watching me as a piece of information rather than a person. "Hi," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Sorry, I could not get the pump to take my card. I just need gas." He stared at me for a second longer than normal, then nodded once. "Pump does not take cards," he said. His voice was calm, flat. Not unfriendly, but not welcoming. Okay, I said. Cash is fine. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a 20, then hesitated. The moment felt strange. It felt like a script, and I was not sure I was saying the right lines. He did not move toward the register. He just stood there, eyes on me, as if waiting for me to finish something. Do I pay you? I asked, trying to keep it light. He blinked slowly. You can, he said. That was an odd answer. Not yes. Not sure. Not a normal response. I set the 20 on the counter. He did not pick it up. I waited, then asked, can you turn the pump on? He looked past me, toward the front windows, toward the dark outside, as if the idea of turning on the pump had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the town. Go pump, he said. I stared at him. Will it work now? He did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, where are you going? Page, I said automatically. Up north. He nodded again, the motion minimal. Road is long, he said. I know, I replied, trying to sound normal. That's why I need gas. He did not smile. He did not react. He just watched me. Something in me shifted. The relief I had felt when I saw the lights was being replaced by a low, creeping unease that did not have a clear reason. The store was normal. The man was normal. The town was quiet. But quiet towns exist. But my instincts were whispering something else. Not danger in the immediate sense. Something more subtle. Misalignment. Like I had stepped into a place that was built to look familiar but did not quite understand the behaviors that go with familiarity. Okay, I said, taking my wallet and backing away from the counter. I'm going to pump. He did not move. He did not follow. He just stayed by the back doorway, watching me leave. The bell above the door rang again as I stepped outside. The cold hit harder now, as if the town's light was not giving off warmth, only illumination. I walked back to my car and looked around, letting my eyes scan the empty street. The town was still, too still. The gas station was the only place that seemed active, and even it felt staged. The fluorescent hum, the flickering neon, the old pumps. I picked up the nozzle again and squeezed the handle. Gas began to flow. The analog dial spun. The numbers clicked upward. The sound of liquid moving through the hose was real and satisfying. Relief hit me again, but it was tempered now by the knowledge that I did not understand this place. I kept pumping, watching the dial climb. $10, $12, $15. When it hit 20, I released the handle and put the nozzle back. My car now had enough fuel to get to Page easily. I could leave. I could get back to the highway. I could laugh about this later. I got back in the car and started the engine. The headlights swept across the town, and that was when I saw the sign. On the edge of the gas station property, half hidden by a scrubby bush, there was a metal sign mounted low, not reflective, not meant to be seen from the road. It looked like it had been there a long time. It was rusted, the letters faded, but readable when the headlights hit it at the right angle. No maps, no phones, no stops. I stared at it, pulse jumping. The message felt too specific, too modern. No phones. That was not an old warning. That was a warning meant for now. I looked toward the store. Through the glass door, I could see the fluorescent lit interior. The man was no longer visible. The store looked empty again, as if he had stepped back into the corridor and vanished. A sharp unease tightened in my chest. I put the car in drive. As I rolled forward, my headlights swept across the main street, and I saw something else. A row of houses, dark. No porch lights, no carports, no movement. But every house had a curtain slightly parted, like someone had peeked out and then stopped. Not all of them, not obviously, just enough to make it feel like a pattern. I swallowed, hands tight on the wheel, and drove toward the dirt road that led back to the highway. The town did not resist. There were no barriers, no gates, no signs telling me to stay. It simply let me go, which should have been comforting. Except as I drove out, I realized something. I had not seen a single street name, not one. Not even the kind of small-town wooden signs you see on poles at intersections. No Main Street, no First Avenue, nothing. It was a place without labels. The dirt road rose and curved, leading back toward the highway. The lights of the town receded behind me, and the desert returned to darkness. At the top of the rise, the highway came into view. US 89. A strip of asphalt, cutting north and south. Headlights from no other cars. No visible traffic. I exhaled. relief flooding my chest. I pulled onto the highway, signaled, merged, and headed north again. For the first minute, everything felt normal. Then my GPS recalculated. The screen blinked, then displayed my route. It showed me on US 89, but the town I had just left was not there. The dirt road was not there. The entire detour did not exist on the map. Worse, the distance to Page had increased. It was as if, while I had been in that town, time had moved, but not in my favor. The road north had lengthened. My estimated arrival time shifted. It pushed later. I stared at it, trying to make sense. Then, in my rearview mirror, I saw headlights, a single set, far behind, coming from the direction of the dirt road. They were not on the highway before. There had been no cars. The headlights did not move like a car accelerating. They appeared already at speed, already aligned behind me, as if they had simply turned on in the right place at the right time. My mouth went dry. I watched them, waiting for them to pass, to drift, to behave normally. They did none of those things. They held the same distance. My heart began to pound. I sped up slightly. The headlights sped up. I slowed. They slowed. As if the car behind me was not trying to catch me, not trying to pass, but simply trying to remain where it was, maintaining the relationship. I forced myself to breathe. This could still be coincidence. This could still be a driver heading north, matching my speed. But the road was empty, and the night had become very quiet, and I could not stop thinking about the sign. No maps, no phones, no stops. I glanced down at my phone again. Still no service. I turned the radio on, desperate for something familiar. Static. I flipped through frequencies. Static. A faint hiss. Nothing. Then, for a brief moment, a voice cut through, distorted but clear enough to make my skin crawl. Do not stop. The words were simple, spoken in the same flat tone as the man in the store. Not a broadcast voice, not a DJ. The same cadence. My hand froze on the dial. The radio returned to static instantly, as if the sentence had never been there. I swallowed hard and kept driving. The headlights behind me stayed. The road ahead stayed empty. The night around me stayed black. And then, on the right side of the highway, a familiar hand-painted sign appeared in my headlights. Gas, 2 miles. My stomach dropped. I had been driving north. I had left the town behind. I had merged back onto the highway, and yet the sign was here again. I stared at it as I passed, a cold, sinking understanding settling into my chest. It was not that the town was off the map. It was that the town was not fixed. It did not sit at a location you could reach by coordinates. It sat on the road wherever the road decided you needed it. Wherever you were, low enough, tired enough, alone enough, predictable enough, and now it had found me once, which meant it knew how to find me again. The headlights behind me held steady. The fuel gauge, which had been full, dipped slightly. Not enough to matter, not enough to panic, but enough to feel like a message. I gripped the wheel tighter and drove into the dark, watching the road, watching my mirrors, watching my dashboard for any sign of normal behavior. And as the miles passed, with no towns, no lights, no exits, only the quiet hiss of tires on asphalt, I realized something I had not considered before. Maybe the worst part of a place that isn't on the map is not that no one can find it. It is that it can always find you. Story 3. The headlights behind me never passed. Interstate 40, Texas Panhandle. I noticed the headlights behind me because there was nothing else to notice. That is how it starts on I-40 out there, the Texas Panhandle at night, where the land flattens and stretches until it stops feeling like landscape and starts feeling like an absence. The highway becomes the only defined thing, a pale ribbon of paint and reflective markers cutting through darkness. Everything beyond the shoulder might as well not exist. I had been driving for hours, westbound, chasing a schedule I had built with too much confidence and not enough rest. Amarillo was behind me. The last decent coffee was long gone. My playlist had looped twice. The GPS voice had stopped sounding helpful and started sounding indifferent. The dash clock read 1:36 a.m. The road was empty. No trucks. No clusters of taillights. No occasional oncoming headlights on the opposite lanes. because the median was wide and dark and swallowed everything that wasn't directly in front of you. My world had narrowed to the cone of my headlights and the small pool of green light from my dashboard. That is why the headlights behind me stood out so sharply when they appeared. At first, they were just a faint glow in the mirror, 2 small points, steady and far away. I registered them with mild relief. Another driver meant I wasn't alone. Another driver meant the system was still functioning. You share a road with strangers, and it feels like proof of reality. They were far enough back that I could not see the outline of the vehicle, just the beams. I drove on. 10 minutes passed. The headlights were still there, and they were still the same distance away. That was the first detail that felt odd. Not alarming, just odd. On a highway, cars move relative to each other constantly. Someone either gains on you or you gain on them. Even if you are both on cruise control, the road, the wind, the slight differences in speed create change. This car did not. The 2 beams stayed fixed in my mirror, as if glued to the same point. I checked my speed. 72. Cruise control steady. I told myself the other driver might be matching my speed exactly, a coincidence. Or maybe they were a truck with a governor set to the same limit. That made sense. Trucks do that. Except the lights did not look like truck lights. They were low, even, not towering. And the spacing was too narrow for a big rig. I let the thought drift away. Then the highway dipped slightly and rose, and for a moment my mirrors caught a clearer view. I saw the faint outline of a car, dark, against the road, and I saw that its headlights were unusually bright, white-blue, the kind that make your eyes hurt, even from a distance. I frowned and adjusted my rearview mirror, tilting it to reduce glare. The beams shifted slightly, but the car remained the same distance away, perfectly aligned. Another 10 minutes, still there. My irritation grew, subtle at first. The kind of irritation you feel when someone is hovering behind you without passing, forcing you to think about them. On a 2-lane road, you understand it. On a highway with multiple lanes, it feels unnecessary, almost rude. I moved into the right lane, giving them a clear path to pass. The headlights shifted with me, sliding into the right lane behind my car. I waited, expecting them to overtake. They did not. I slowed slightly, letting my speed drop to 68. The headlights slowed. I sped back up to 75. They sped up. Not delayed, not gradually, in sync. My skin prickled. I told myself again that it could be coincidence. Another driver on cruise control, adjusting as I adjusted, maybe not even thinking about it. But the way the headlights responded felt too precise, like I was being mirrored. I glanced at the GPS screen. It showed a long, straight stretch of I-40 with the next town still far. No exits for miles, just dark. My phone had no service, the little empty icon in the corner feeling suddenly personal. I turned on the radio, static. Of course. This far out, stations come and go. They fade in, they fade out. Sometimes you get a preacher. Sometimes you get a country song. Sometimes you get nothing but the hiss of an empty frequency. I flipped through stations, more for the action than the result. My fingers needed something to do. A voice came through briefly, distorted and thin, then vanished. I caught only a few words. Eastbound, caution. I leaned closer, turned the volume up. Static. I flipped again. More static. I settled on a faint station playing old rock, the kind that feels like it has been looping on a forgotten tower for decades. The music was distant, like it was being broadcast from the bottom of a well. It filled the silence enough to keep my thoughts from spiraling. The headlights behind me stayed. At 2:19 a.m., I passed an exit sign for a small town I didn't recognize. The exit ramp peeled away to the right, a dark curve leading into the even darker emptiness beyond the highway. There were no lights visible from the town itself, if it existed. Just the sign, reflective and official. I considered taking it, not because I needed anything, but because the idea of leaving the highway suddenly felt appealing. Exits are choices. They are proof you can change your situation. They are escape routes in the simplest sense, but the rational part of my mind warned me against it. Taking an exit at 2:19 a.m., in the middle of nowhere, with no lights and no service, for no reason, was how you ended up in trouble. The highway was safer, the highway was predictable, so I stayed on I-40, the headlights stayed on me. The longer it went, the more it started to feel like pressure. Not the immediate pressure of a threat, but the slow pressure of being observed. Like someone had decided to follow me without making it obvious. I tried not to look in the mirror too much, but my eyes kept flicking back. Every glance confirmed the same thing. 2 bright points, perfectly centered, exactly the same distance away. It began to feel impossible that I was seeing a real car. I thought about depth perception at night, about how headlights can distort distance, about how you can misjudge how far something is because you have no reference points. I told myself the car might be moving, passing, falling back, but my brain was failing to interpret it correctly, so I gave myself reference. I slowed until the speedometer read 60, on an empty highway in the middle of the night. That felt like crawling. The headlights slowed to match. I signaled and moved to the left lane. The headlights moved to the left lane behind me. I signaled back to the right lane. They followed. My mouth went dry. I tried to be logical. Maybe they thought I was playing some kind of game. Maybe they were annoyed. Maybe they were drunk and weaving, following my movements unconsciously. Maybe they were a lone driver who didn't want to pass because they felt safer behind another vehicle. That last idea almost comforted me. Then I realized how absurd it was. If they wanted safety, they would stay at a reasonable distance. They would not maintain a fixed point like an anchor. I could not see their grille. I could not see their hood. I could not see the outline well enough to identify the car. Only the lights. It was like the car behind me was made of headlights and nothing else. At 2:47 a.m., the road curved gently, one of the rare bends in that long stretch. The headlights vanished. Not gradually, not falling back behind the curve, but gone, like someone had flipped a switch. My shoulders dropped with relief so sudden it made me dizzy. I exhaled and realized I had been breathing shallowly for the last hour. I laughed once, quietly, at how ridiculous I had been. It was just another driver. They had taken an exit. They had turned off. They had passed into some fold of the night. I checked my mirror again. Empty. My pulse slowed. The rock station fizzled into static. Then a different song started, brighter, clearer. The kind of clarity that makes you realize how distorted it had been before. I turned the volume down. I told myself it was over. That was when the radio cut out entirely. Not into static, into silence. The display still lit, the volume still set, but no sound came out. I frowned and tapped it. Sometimes the signal drops. Sometimes the station dies. Sometimes your speakers glitch. But when I flipped through frequencies, there was no hiss, no faint bleed, nothing. Every station sounded like dead air. I felt a small wave of unease. Then a voice came through the speakers, low and calm. Traffic advisory. I froze. It was not a DJ. It was not the robotic tone of the GPS. It was a human voice, but too formal, like it was reading from a script. Traffic advisory, it repeated. My hands tightened on the wheel. The highway ahead was empty. There was no traffic, no cones, no construction, no brake lights. The voice continued. Single vehicle, westbound, maintain lane, maintain speed. My throat went tight. The words felt like they were aimed at me, too specific to be random. I glanced at the radio display. It was still showing the rock station frequency, but the station name had disappeared. The little letters that usually show call signs were blank. Do not slow, the voice said. My heart began to hammer. I looked at the GPS. It still showed me moving west on I-40. No alerts, no warnings, no mention of traffic. Do not take the next exit, the voice added. That was when my fear snapped into focus, because the voice was not a general advisory. It was instructions, and my skin crawled at how calmly it delivered them, as if this was routine. In the mirror, the headlights reappeared. 2 white blue points, same distance, perfectly centered. It was as if they had never left. My stomach dropped. I felt the urge to speed up, to slam the accelerator and put distance between us. But the voice's instruction hung in the air, and the precision of the headlights' movements earlier made me doubt speed would help. Still, instinct won. I accelerated. 75. 80. The engine pitch rose. The road lines flickered faster. The headlights stayed the same distance behind me, as if they were tethered. I pushed to 85. The car remained behind, unchanged. The beams did not grow brighter or dimmer. They stayed fixed. The radio voice returned, calm. Maintain speed. I clenched my jaw. No, I muttered, as if the road could hear me. No. The next exit sign appeared ahead, reflective green. The town name blurred in my headlights. The ramp peeled away into darkness. The voice had said not to take it, which made it the only choice that felt like mine. I signaled and moved toward the exit. As soon as my tires crossed the white line into the ramp lane, the radio emitted a sharp burst of static, loud and violent, like a scream made of electricity. I flinched and jerked the wheel slightly, correcting. The ramp curved away. Behind me, the headlights followed, still fixed, still aligned. My heart pounded. The ramp led downward, away from the highway lights, into a darker corridor lined with dry grass. There were no streetlights, no signs of a town, only the curve of asphalt and the edge of my headlights. At the bottom of the ramp, there should have been an intersection, a stop sign, a set of choices. Instead, the ramp merged back onto the highway. My mouth went dry. I blinked, disbelieving. The ramp had looped. I was back on I-40, westbound, the same lane, the same road, as if the exit had been a half-circle designed to return me. The exit sign I had just taken was behind me again, visible in the mirror for a moment before fading. My chest tightened to the point of pain. I glanced at the GPS. It did not show any exit taken. It did not show a detour. It showed a straight line. It showed nothing unusual. The headlights behind me stayed. The radio voice returned, softer now, almost conversational. Do not attempt. My throat constricted. I tried the next exit. This time, I waited until I was closer, until the sign was clear. It was a different town name, something I didn't recognize. The ramp peeled away, dark. I signaled, moved into it. No static burst this time, just silence. The ramp curved. At the bottom, it merged back onto the highway again, same loop. Same return. Same sense of being corrected. The exits were not exits. They were gestures. They existed to create the appearance of choice, while removing the ability to use it. I began to shake. Not from cold, not from fatigue, but from the slow realization that I was inside something that could manipulate the most basic rules of movement. Roads, ramps, distance. The headlights behind me did not pass because passing would imply separation. It would imply a change in relationship. This car did not want to change relationship. It wanted to stay exactly where it was, behind me, watching. The radio voice came back. Traffic advisory, westbound. Maintain speed, maintain lane. I stared ahead, eyes burning. The highway remained empty. No signs of a town, no lights. Only flat land and the thin line of asphalt. I tried to slow, just slightly, to see what would happen. The moment my speed dipped below 70, the headlights behind me flared brighter, not closer, but sharper, as if the light itself had been adjusted. The beams seemed to fill my mirror, white blue and unforgiving. The radio crackled, do not slow. My pulse spiked. I brought my speed back up. The headlights softened, returning to their fixed distance. It was a response, a correction, as if the car behind me, or whatever was using the headlights, was training me. I felt trapped in a loop of compliance. Go this speed. Stay in this lane. Do not leave. Do not change. I thought about calling someone, but there was no service. I thought about stopping on the shoulder, but the voice had warned against slowing, and the idea of stopping with that car behind me felt like walking into a trap. I tried to rationalize again. Maybe this was a prank. Maybe someone had rigged something. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe fatigue had finally cracked my brain. But the exits looping back were real. I had felt the curve. I had seen the merge. That was not in my head. The only thing that felt unreal was the idea that it could be happening. At 3:41 a.m., I saw a digital sign ahead. One of those overhead boards that usually warns about construction or accidents. It glowed amber against the dark. Relief surged. Those signs are part of the official system. They are managed. They mean someone is watching the road in a legitimate way. As I drew closer, the message resolved into letters. Traffic advisory. Maintain speed. Do not exit. My stomach turned. It was not a warning. It was the same instruction the radio had been giving, now projected on an official sign, as if the highway itself had been recruited into the directive. I passed under it and felt suddenly smaller, like the road had decided to formalize what was happening. In the mirror, the headlights remained. 2 points, same distance. I realized something then, with a cold clarity. The headlights behind me did not behave like a car because they did not need to. They were not navigating the road. They were part of the road. They were a function, a response, a presence that activated when a driver met the right conditions. Alone, late, predictable, an enforcement mechanism. My hands trembled on the wheel. The radio voice returned one last time. "Remain in lane," it said, almost gently. "Remain in motion." I swallowed hard, throat dry, eyes fixed on the empty highway stretching into darkness. I kept driving because driving was the only permitted behavior. And in my mirror, those headlights stayed exactly where they had been for hours, unwavering, patient, and perfectly matched. Not because the driver behind me couldn't pass, but because passing was never the point. The point was to make sure I understood I was not the one deciding where this road ended. Story 4. There were no exits after midnight, Interstate 70, Western Kansas. I crossed the state line into Kansas a little after midnight, when the road flattened out and the night stopped, pretending it had depth. I had driven I-70 enough times to know what it was supposed to feel like. Long, boring, honest. A highway that makes no attempt to distract you from the fact that you are crossing an enormous stretch of land designed to be passed through, not experienced. During the day it feels endless. At night it feels suspended. I told myself that once I hit Kansas, I would push through another hour, maybe 2, then stop. I had a thermos of coffee, a podcast queued, and the quiet confidence that comes from thinking you understand a place because you have seen it on maps so many times. The road welcomed me with the usual signs. Mile markers ticked by in order. Exit signs appeared at predictable intervals, naming towns that barely registered, names you only notice because they break the monotony. Everything behaved for a while. By 12:47 a.m., the traffic had thinned to nothing. The few trucks I had been leapfrogging disappeared ahead or fell back, swallowed by the dark. The opposite lanes were empty too, their occasional headlights replaced by a wide, unbroken black median. The highway felt wider without other vehicles, more exposed. I set my cruise control and settled in, letting the hum of the tires and the steady rhythm of dash lines do their work on my mind. The podcast voices faded into background noise. My thoughts drifted. That was when I noticed how long it had been since I had seen an exit sign. At first, it was just a passing thought, the kind you get when you realize you have been staring at the same thing for too long. I checked the dash clock, 1:13 a.m. I tried to remember the last exit I had passed. I could picture the sign, vaguely green and reflective, but the name of the town slid away when I reached for it. That was normal too. Kansas towns blur together. Still, I expected to see another sign soon. 5 minutes passed. 10. The road remained unchanged. Flat, straight, dark. No glow of distant towns. No clusters of lights. No silhouettes of grain elevators or water towers. I turned the podcast off and listened. The car sounded normal. The engine steady. The tires a constant hiss. The air conditioner cycling quietly. I checked the GPS screen. It showed me moving along I-70, the thin blue line stretching east and west. Small dots marked towns along the route, spaced at regular intervals. According to the map, I should have passed 2 exits by now. I frowned and zoomed in. The little arrow that represented my car slid smoothly along the line, unconcerned. Okay, I muttered. Maybe I've missed them. It was possible. At night, if you are not paying attention, signs can slip past you. The brain fills in gaps. You assume the system is working even when you are not watching it closely. I told myself the next exit would come up soon. At 1:29 a.m., I felt it. Not fear. Not yet. A subtle tightening, like the beginning of a headache. The road felt unchanged, but my sense of time began to stretch. The minutes between glances at the clock felt longer than they should. I watched the dash display tick from 1:29 to 1:30. Still no exits. The highway did not curve. It did not dip. It did not rise. It just extended forward, unwavering. I reached for my coffee and took a sip. It was lukewarm now, bitter. I grimaced and set it back. The fatigue crept in quietly, the way it always does. Not sudden drowsiness, but a soft fogging at the edges of thought, the kind that makes you miss small details. I rolled down my window a few inches to let cold air in. The rush of wind sharpened my senses briefly. The night air smelled like dry grass and earth, faint but clean. I closed the window again and focused. At 1:42 a.m., I saw an exit sign. Relief washed through me before I even read it. The sign appeared on the right, reflective green, mounted high on a metal post. It named a town I recognized, one I had driven through before during the day. I cannot remember the name now, only the feeling of familiarity. I slowed slightly and signaled, the motion automatic. I did not need anything from the town. I did not need gas or food, but the idea of leaving the highway felt suddenly important. The exit ramp peeled away gently, a dark curve leading downward. I followed it. The ramp was unlit, which was not unusual. My headlights carved the path. The asphalt looked clean, recently maintained. As I descended, I waited for the intersection at the bottom. The stop sign, the crossroad, the place where you choose left or right. Instead, the ramp curved again. It curved more sharply this time, looping under the highway. For a second I thought I had misjudged it, that this was a cloverleaf design common on interstates. But there was no overpass, no crossing road, no sign indicating a merge. The ramp rose, and then I was back on I-70, westbound. My hands tightened on the wheel. I checked the mirrors, disoriented. The highway stretched ahead, identical to how it had before. The exit sign I had taken was behind me, visible in the rear view for a moment before it faded into darkness. My heart began to beat faster. I glanced at the GPS. It showed me continuing straight on the interstate. No exit taken, no detour, no deviation. Okay, I said out loud, my voice sounding thin. Okay. There were explanations. There had to be. Some exits are just rest areas that loop back. Some are emergency turnarounds. Some are poorly marked. But the sign had named a town. I was sure of it. I kept driving. The road remained empty. No exits, no signs. Just the long stretch of asphalt and the steady march of mile markers. At 2:01 a.m., I tried again. Another exit sign appeared, this one naming a different town. I read it twice, committing it to memory. I slowed, signaled, and took the ramp. This ramp was steeper. It dropped away from the highway more abruptly, the darkness at the bottom thicker. As I descended, a familiar unease crept in, the sense that I was repeating an action that had already failed. The ramp curved. It looped. It returned me to the interstate. This time, when I merged back onto I-70, my chest tightened painfully. The exits were not exits. They were gestures. They existed to create the appearance of choice without offering it. I checked the time, 2:09 a.m. I had been driving through Kansas for hours. According to the map, I should have been approaching a larger town by now, one with lights visible from miles away. The horizon remained black. The fatigue deepened, not the kind that makes you sleepy, but the kind that makes reality feel slightly malleable. My thoughts slowed. The road's sameness pressed in, making it hard to tell how long I had been staring at the same scene. I slapped my thigh lightly, trying to stay sharp. The next exit sign appeared at 2:17 a.m. I did not take it. I watched it pass, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that I had not repeated the loop. Dread that I had no idea where it would have led. I told myself to keep going until I reached a rest area. Those are unavoidable. They have signage well in advance. They have long deceleration lanes. They are not optional. At 2:26 a.m., I saw a sign for a rest area. 2 miles. I felt a surge of gratitude. Rest areas are neutral spaces. They are maintained. They have bathrooms, vending machines, sometimes a coffee machine that works just well enough to keep you alive. 2 miles passed slowly. Then I saw the rest area exit. I slowed, signaled, and took it. The ramp felt different immediately. Wider, better lit, official. It curved gently and descended. At the bottom, I expected to see the familiar layout, a parking lot, a building, maybe a few trucks idling. Instead, the ramp curved again, and again. My stomach dropped as I recognized the motion. The same looping arc, the same controlled redirection. The ramp rose. I merged back onto I-70. I gripped the wheel hard enough that my hands ached. No, I said, louder now. No. The GPS screen remained calm. It did not acknowledge the rest area. It did not show a loop. It showed a straight line. I felt a prickling along my arms, the beginning of panic. I needed to break the pattern. I needed to stop. The shoulder appeared wide enough a few minutes later. Not a proper pull-off, but a stretch of pavement that looked safe enough. I signaled, slowed, and eased onto it. As soon as my tires crossed onto the shoulder, something changed. Not visually, not immediately. The road still looked the same, but the sound shifted. The hum of my tires dropped to a lower pitch, and underneath it, I heard something else. A faint vibration, like a distant engine. I slowed further. The vibration grew stronger. I glanced in the mirror. Headlights flared behind me. I had not seen another car for hours. The headlights were close, too close, bearing down on me fast. My heart leapt into my throat. I swerved slightly back into the lane, instinctively trying to avoid being hit. The headlights slowed instantly, matching my speed. They stayed just behind me, not passing, not honking, not reacting. I stared, pulse hammering. The moment I drifted back toward the shoulder again, the headlights surged closer, bright and sudden. A warning. I moved fully back into the lane. The headlights settled. I understood then, with a cold clarity, stopping was not permitted. I stayed on the highway, hands shaking. The exits continued to appear at irregular intervals now, some close together, some far apart, all of them identical in function, offering escape and then retracting it. I stopped taking them. Time blurred. The dash clock crept toward 3 a.m. The road began to feel less like a path through land and more like a corridor with rules. Stay in motion, stay in lane, do not leave. I began to watch the mile markers obsessively, needing something to anchor me. They ticked by, but the numbers began to feel abstract, detached from distance. I could not tell if I was making progress or circling within a segment. At 3:18 a.m., the sky ahead began to lighten slightly, a faint shift from pure black to deep blue. Dawn, hope flared. Daylight would reveal the trick. It would show the ramps for what they were. It would restore the world's geometry. The light grew slowly, painfully slowly. As it did, I noticed something I had not seen before. The exits. In the growing light, I could see the ramps more clearly. They were not poorly designed. They were not confusing. They were intentional. Each ramp curved away from the highway and then looped back with precise symmetry. Not a cloverleaf, not a rest area, but a closed arc, like a racetrack exit designed only to return you. There were no connecting roads branching off, no towns, no access points, just loops. I felt sick. This was not a malfunction. It was not an accident of infrastructure. It was a system designed to keep traffic flowing while removing the ability to leave. As the sun crept higher, the land around the highway revealed itself. Flat fields, dry grass, no buildings, no roads intersecting the interstate, nothing to exit to. I realized then that I had not seen a single overpass in hours. No county roads crossing above or below. No signs of local traffic. The highway was isolated from the land around it. A sealed corridor. The headlights behind me appeared again as the light grew, no longer hidden by darkness. In daylight, I could see more of the vehicle. It was a state trooper car. White, marked. Official, relief surged, sharp and overwhelming. I slowed slightly, ready to pull over, to flag them down, to explain everything. The trooper stayed behind me, maintaining distance. I signaled and eased toward the shoulder. The trooper's lights did not activate. I slowed more. The trooper stayed behind me, still no lights. I came nearly to a stop. The trooper remained, and then, calmly, moved into the left lane and passed me. As it did, I saw inside. The driver's seat was empty. The car continued ahead, merging back into the lane in front of me, maintaining speed, moving with purpose. I stared, frozen. The realization settled slowly, like dust. The enforcement did not need a driver. The road did not need supervision. It enforced itself. I kept driving because driving was the only allowed state. The sun rose fully, illuminating the endless stretch of I-70. The exits continued to appear, loop, and return. And somewhere in western Kansas, long after midnight had passed, I understood that the highway did not trap me by accident. It trapped me by design, because a road does not need to take you anywhere. It only needs to keep you moving. Story 5. The car behind me had no driver. Blue Ridge Parkway, North Carolina and Virginia. I should not have been on the Blue Ridge Parkway that late. That is the first thing everyone says when I tell this story, and I understand why. The parkway is not a highway. It is not designed for speed or efficiency. It is meant to be scenic, slow, deliberate. During the day, it feels expansive and peaceful. At night, especially in fog, it becomes narrow, intimate, and unforgiving. But I had misjudged the time. I had spent the evening visiting a friend near Asheville, talking longer than planned, letting the hours slide by unnoticed. When I finally left, the clock on my dash read 11:41 p.m. The quickest route home would have taken me down toward the interstate, but I was tired, and the thought of dealing with late-night truck traffic felt exhausting. The parkway felt quieter, familiar, calmer. I told myself I would take it for a short stretch, just until I reached one of the main exits. Fog had already settled in the higher elevations by the time I merged onto it. Not thick enough to stop you, but dense enough to shrink the world. The road ahead was visible only in segments, each curve revealed and then swallowed again. The tree line pressed in close, black shapes against the gray. I drove carefully, headlights on low beam, speed steady. The yellow center line appeared and disappeared under the fog like a guide rope. There was no traffic. That was not unusual. The parkway empties out at night. Rangers discourage late driving. Wildlife becomes more active. Most people choose faster roads. I was alone, and at first that felt peaceful. The radio did not work. No stations reached this stretch. I left it off and listened to the quiet, broken only by the hum of tires and the occasional rush of wind when the road opened briefly to a valley overlook. At 11:58 p.m., I passed a scenic pull-off. It was marked with a small brown sign and a widened shoulder, barely visible through the fog. I noted it absently. I had driven this road enough to recognize the rhythm of those pull-offs, appearing every few miles, offering places to stop during the day and places to avoid at night. A few minutes later, I saw headlights behind me, 2 points of light, muted by fog, emerging around a curve I had just passed. I felt a small flicker of relief. Another car meant I was not entirely alone. Another car meant the road was being used, that the night had not fully claimed it. They stayed far back at first, their beams diffused, ghostly. I maintained my speed, careful not to rush the curves. The headlights maintained their distance. After a while, I noticed something odd. The fog between us never seemed to change. Normally, as a car approaches or falls back, the way its headlights interact with fog shifts. The light thickens, thins, spreads. These headlights did not do that. They remained fixed. The same brightness, the same shape, as if pinned to a specific point in space. I checked my speed. 45, reasonable for the conditions. I slowed slightly, expecting the car behind me to close the gap. The headlights slowed too. I sped up gently. They sped up. My skin prickled. I told myself the other driver was being cautious, matching my pace, because they did not want to pass in fog. That was reasonable. People do that, especially on unfamiliar roads. Still, I felt watched. The parkway curved, long and slow, hugging the mountain. The fog thickened briefly, then thinned again. For a moment, the headlights disappeared completely. My shoulders relaxed. Then they reappeared, closer this time. Not aggressively close, but nearer than before, as if the car had advanced without the intermediate steps. I glanced in the mirror, trying to see the outline of the vehicle. The fog swallowed everything but the lights. No grille, no windshield reflection, just 2 bright points hovering in the mist. At 12:17 a.m., I reached another scenic pull-off. This one was wider, the pavement opening into a small lot that disappeared into darkness beyond the headlights. During the day, you could park there and look out over layers of blue mountains. At night, it was just a void. I considered pulling in, not because I needed to stop, but because I wanted to see what the car behind me would do. Would it pass? Would it pull into? Would it keep going? The idea of testing it felt risky, but the need to understand outweighed the caution. I signaled and eased into the pull-off. The headlights followed. They did not hesitate. They did not pass. They turned in behind me, maintaining the same distance. I slowed nearly to a stop. The headlights slowed. I stopped completely. The headlights stopped. I sat there, hands tight on the wheel, heart beating hard enough that I could feel it in my ears. Fog drifted slowly through the pull-off, illuminated by my headlights and theirs. The world felt suspended, like we were inside a snow globe that someone had forgotten to shake. I waited for the other car to pull alongside me, to open a door. to do something human. It did not. The headlights stayed behind me, fixed. I put the car in park and turned off my engine. The silence was immediate and heavy. I expected the other car's engine to be audible, even faintly. I expected the low rumble of an idling motor. There was nothing, just the soft hiss of fog moving through trees. My mouth went dry. I reached for my phone, more out of reflex than hope. No service. The screen brightness felt intrusive in the dark. I lowered the window slightly. Cold air slipped in, damp and sharp. Still no sound from the car behind me. I forced myself to breathe slowly. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding wrong in the fog, swallowed too quickly. No answer. I turned my head and looked directly through my rear window. The headlights glared back at me, bright enough that I had to squint. The fog between us glowed white. I could not see the car itself. Only the lights. I stayed there for a full minute, maybe more. Time stretched, unmoored. Finally, I made a decision. I put the car back in drive. As soon as my engine turned over, the headlights behind me brightened slightly, as if in acknowledgement. I pulled back onto the road. The headlights followed. The parkway narrowed again, the pull-off fading behind us. The fog thickened, then thinned. A few minutes later, I saw the same pull-off again, the same sign, the same shape of pavement opening to the right. I frowned. That should not have been possible. The parkway curves, but it does not loop that tightly. There are miles between pull-offs, especially ones that large. I checked the dash clock. 12:31 a.m. I had not turned around. I had not taken any side roads. There were none to take. I passed the pull-off, uneasy. In the mirror, the headlights stayed. As the road continued, I began to notice patterns. The same crooked tree near the edge of the road, its branches reaching over the pavement like fingers. The same reflective marker bent slightly inward. The same patch of fog that pooled low in a shallow dip. Each time, I told myself I was imagining it. The parkway is repetitive by nature. Trees look like trees, fog looks like fog, but the repetition was too exact. At 12:44 a.m., I reached another overlook, or rather, the same one again. I felt a cold knot settle in my stomach. This time, I did not pull in. I kept driving, eyes fixed ahead, trying to force the road to change. The headlights behind me never wavered. I tried to slow to a crawl. They slowed. I tried to accelerate on a straight stretch. They accelerated. The distance between us never changed. At some point, I realized I could no longer remember the last time I had seen a mile marker. The parkway has them, small and understated, but I had not noticed one in a long time. The fog thickened suddenly, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I slowed instinctively, my knuckles white on the wheel. The headlights behind me grew brighter, not closer, just more intense, their beams cutting through the fog with unnatural clarity. I felt a wave of panic rise. I needed to leave the road. I watched desperately for an exit sign, a ranger station, anything. Finally, I saw a sign emerge from the fog ahead. A small, brown sign with white lettering. Exit, 1 mile. Relief surged through me so sharply it made my eyes sting. I focused on it, counting the distance. The road curved gently. The fog thinned just enough for me to see the exit ramp appear, a narrow strip peeling away to the right. I signaled and took it without hesitation. The ramp descended, steeper than I expected. My headlights swept across trees and rock, revealing nothing familiar. Behind me, the headlights followed. The ramp curved again, tighter now. At the bottom, I expected to see a stop sign, a crossroad, a connection to the outside world. Instead, the ramp rose. It merged back onto the parkway. My heart dropped. I was back where I had been. The same curve, the same fog, the same trees. The exit had not led out. It had led back. I laughed, a short, broken sound, more breath than voice. "No," I whispered. "No, no." In the mirror, the headlights remained, unblinking. I glanced at my fuel gauge. Still over half. Time was passing, but distance was not. I began to feel a creeping certainty, not panic, but something colder. The road was not malfunctioning. It was maintaining a route, maintaining a pattern, maintaining me. At 1:02 a.m., the fog thinned enough for me to see more of the car behind me. Not clearly, not all at once, but in fragments. A dark shape, low, the outline of a sedan. As it drew slightly closer on a straight stretch, I saw the windshield. There was no reflection. I frowned, leaning forward slightly. Then I saw inside. The driver's seat was empty. No hands on the wheel, no headrest silhouette, no movement. The headlights remained steady, perfectly aligned. The car was driving itself. A cold wave washed over me, leaving my limbs numb. I stared, unable to look away, my mind scrambling for explanations. Autonomous vehicle, reflection trick, fog distortion. But the emptiness was too clear. The interior light was off, but the fog allowed just enough illumination to see the shape of the seats. Empty. The car maintained its distance, its position, its obedience to the road. I understood then. The road did not require drivers. It required vehicles, movement, compliance. I was not being followed. I was being accompanied. I drove on because stopping felt impossible. The parkway continued its slow curves, the same pull-offs appearing and reappearing, the same trees reaching overhead. The headlights behind me never passed, never fell back. They did not need to. They were not trying to go anywhere. They were there to make sure I did. At some point, exhaustion set in, not sleepiness, but a dull resignation. My thoughts slowed. Fear gave way to acceptance. The road was not going to release me because it had no reason to. I was moving. I was staying in lane. I was following the rules. Dawn came slowly, thinning the fog, revealing the layered mountains in pale blue and gray. With daylight, the parkway looked almost normal again. The pull-offs looked ordinary. The trees looked like trees, and in my mirror, the headlights were gone. No car, no lights, nothing. I slowed, heart pounding, scanning the road behind me. Empty. I drove another mile, then another. A real exit appeared, clearly marked, leading down toward a town I recognized. This time, I took it. The ramp descended and did not loop. It led to a road with houses, mailboxes, and parked cars. I pulled over and stopped, shaking. When I looked back up at the parkway, it stretched away, quiet and empty, fog lifting as if nothing had ever happened. I drove home the rest of the way on familiar roads, in full daylight, surrounded by people and traffic and noise. But even now, when I drive at night and see headlights behind me that never change distance, I feel that same cold certainty return, because I know now that some roads do not need drivers to enforce their rules. They only need someone willing to keep moving, and once they find you, they remember how you behave. You have reached the end of tonight's drive, the last visible stretch before the road returns to doing what it has always done, quietly, consistently, without remembering who passed through it. If any of these stories stayed with you, if you felt something shift when the route stopped responding, if you caught yourself thinking about how easily a straight road becomes a loop, how quickly a familiar exit stops leading anywhere, how distance can remain unchanged no matter how long you keep moving, do not let the drive end here. Subscribe to continue traveling through places people rely on, places with mile markers and exit signs and navigation systems where the danger does not chase, it maintains, and where the most unsettling moment is realizing the road has already adjusted to your presence. Tell me in the comments which road stayed with you the longest, which drive felt too familiar, which detail unsettled you after it passed, the mile marker that repeated, the town that did not appear on any map, the headlights that never closed the distance, the exit that returned you to the same lane, or the car that followed without needing a driver. Like the video so these stories reach others who drive late to avoid traffic, who trust the blue line on the screen, who believe the danger is always the obvious thing, fatigue, weather, speed, and not the quiet moment where the road stops offering proof that progress is being made. And if you have your own late night drive, you can't explain a stretch of highway that behaved differently than it should have, a town that appeared when you needed it and vanished after, a ramp that returned you, a sign that repeated, a vehicle that followed without intent, or a drive that ended without ever quite arriving, you are always welcome to share it. Send your experience to the business email in the channel bio, and it may become part of a future Entity Shadows episode. Thank you for listening, for staying awake a little longer, for keeping your eyes on the road even when the route felt rehearsed, for trusting your instincts when the distance refused to change. And until next time, watch your mileage. Pay attention to what repeats. And if the road begins to feel too consistent, too empty, or too patient, Do not assume you are still passing through it, because sometimes the most dangerous roads are not the ones that break down, but the ones that keep going long after they stop taking you anywhere. And remember, the dark awaits.